So good afternoon, everybody. Assalamu alaikum. First of all, thank you very much for joining the last session of today. So we're going to talk about a very exciting topic, which is the challenges and opportunities of the industrial water in the GCC. Before we get started, I introduce myself. My name is Zakia Bahjo. I'm the Regional Commercial Manager for the Dow Water and Process Solutions for Middle East, Africa, and Turkey. And I'm very happy to moderate and then to drive the session with my colleagues. We're going to be introducing this in a bit. What I wanted to do first is really setting the stage for when we talk about industrial water in a GCC. There are a few things that I think we might need to share as a high-level insight and a context in the GCC specifically. If you can go to the slides, please. Yeah, I can carry on. Yeah, sorry, again. Oh yeah, I have it, thank you very much, sorry. Okay, so I think this is not an unknown picture for most of us in the water industries, in the GCC in general. We're operating in markets or in countries which have been so far very strong oil-dependent economies. Which I think has been the success and the history of much of our industries in the region. What we've started seeing with all the dynamics around us is moving from an oil-based economies to more diversified economies. That comes with a lot of challenges and a lot of opportunities. Opportunities comes from the fact that industrial networks in a GCC in a GCC country is becoming more diverse than it was the last 5-10 years back, and new industries that are emerging that were not there and were not really strongly associated with our region. I'm talking about industries such as the food and beverage, for instance, the mining, the pharmaceutical, etc. All these industries, they really they are positioned as water-intense industries, which represent a lot of pressure and a lot of advantages as well. Again, that's if you look at those dynamics, I think that puts two sets of pressure on our people or the industrials operating in the water, in the industrial water in general. The first one is the changes in the quality of the feed water, so the water that we treat for industrial application, either production or processing, is becoming more challenging. So there is a very strong need to adapt the technologies that we are using to be able to treat this quality water to the standards that either regulation or health that you want to do. The second set of pressure is really on the water discharge. So either by regulations or by quality, most of those industries, they have to cope with more stringent environment when it comes to regulations and then the qualities. I think the name of the driver here is more innovation, to make sure that whatever we bring as solutions, they're really helping the industrials to make sure that we help them coping with the new quality or changing quality of the water, and making sure that we help them on the reuse or on the cycle as well. I mean, again, we always, those are basic figures, but we always tend to underestimate the amount of water that those industries are consuming. I think if we look at it in a big perspective, we cannot be sustainable either from financials or from environment perspective if we are not able to continually invest in R&D, innovation, and making sure that whatever we bring as practices are sustainable either from economy, from finance, or from technology footprint in general. One of the topics we're going to also spend some time on is the investment. I think most of the projects are really being handled by new investment models to make sure that there is a set of economics to make this project viable from industry perspective. In Dow, we are operating for the region for the last 4 years, so it's a lot of opportunities for us, and it's a lot of relevance for a lot of innovation that we've been introducing in the region. Again, we keep in mind that our drivers are really making sure that we bring solutions that drive value for our customers, from economics, from energy consumption, from cost efficiency, and of course from environment perspective. On the Dow Water and Process Solutions, a lot of innovations that we had over the last 3 to 5 years. The key contribution or benefits is making sure that we bring low energy, high rejections, and we bring a set of expertise and know-how that is supporting us in implementing these technologies in a more efficient way. This is on the DAO water and process solution. I wanted also to spend maybe a couple of minutes on when we talk about the challenge in industrial water. DAO, as a company, we've been putting ourselves our own goals when it comes to sustainability. We just announced last year our 2025 sustainability goals, and maybe just a couple of examples there is that we are putting stringent targets for ourselves when it comes to recycling, for instance, when it comes to operating efficiency, and it comes also to make sure that whatever we do is bringing breakthrough innovations to our customers. Those are a few things that we're going to see moving forward into discussion. And that was my last slide. So before again we start on the panels, I'd like to introduce my colleagues. So we start with Philippe. So Philippe Valerio is the Business Development Director for Industrial Application Middle East for Decremont. So thanks, Philippe, for joining us. Maybe if we can put the... Okay, sorry, I don't have it here. Yeah. So Philippe, he's the Business Development Director for Industrial Application Middle East for Decremont. Philippe has a very strong established career as commissioning engineer for industrial wastewater in the chemical and petrochemical industries. We had the chance to get some of his insight on some of the expertise that are developing for not just for the region but for the other regions for the future. He had worked on a lot of major industry water and wastewater treatment. I think it's a nice opportunity to bring that kind of best practice to share with the team. He's an engineer from École Nationale Supérieure des Mines of Nancy and holds a chemical degree from Chimie Nancy. So thank you, Philippe, for joining us. Then we have Hervé Faujour. So Hervé is the Technical and Performance Director for Veolia Middle East. So Hervé graduated as process engineer. He's been in Veolia in Malaysia for an assignment in 1999. We're very lucky because he brings again a very strong expertise when it comes to design for large potable water plant. Shanghai is a good example, for instance. I think that's a good to have you, Hervé. Then David Hussein. So he's joining from a CH2M Hill. So he's a senior client account management. Again, very, very strong experience in different geographies. So we'll be very happy to hear expertise at CH2M and then before that. And from that, maybe I can just get started. Does this work? Yeah, it's work. Thank you. Okay, so I think after setting the stage and before going into the first round of question, maybe David, when we were sitting outside, I think one of the topic that you were sharing with us is how important to have water management holistic approach when we are really projecting ourselves in the future. Why don't you share more with us and the rest of the audience?
Good, thank you. So I've been in the water industry for a very long time, and I think those of you who, maybe many of you have also, and I think that we have recognized or we felt that the water was undervalued in the market for very many years, and as a result of that, really most of the work in wastewater treatment and water reuse in refineries and other industrial plants has been driven really by regulation. Rather than by economics. And so forcing things to happen by regulation is always a little bit more difficult. I really believe that we're at a moment in time that we've been waiting for perhaps decades, where the economics of water and the economics of water scarcity are finally taking over, and they're finally driving opportunities and decision making that is really going to change the face of industrial water treatment. The fundamental change that I think is the fundamental change of approach to water treatment, I refer to the difference between calling it water treatment or wastewater treatment and calling it water management. I think historically the approach has been to treat the water supply, whatever that water supply might be, whether it's groundwater or a municipal supply, to make it suitable for the uses, the industrial uses, and then on the back end of the plant, of course, treating the wastewater to make it suitable for discharge. And over the last few decades, there has been increasing emphasis on water reuse, or water reduction. So I think most plants have implemented some water reduction measures. And there's been some approach to water reuse and recycle also. But I think what is really happening now is the economics and the social environment and everything else is driving a much broader, more holistic approach to water management. So it's no longer treating what's coming in and treating what's going out, but really looking at the water as a very important resource. I like the analogy of looking at the oil industry. If you look at an oil refinery, there's a whole lot of different unit processes in an oil refinery. And at each one of those processes, they have a primary function that they're performing, and there's a main feed stream that comes out. But there's also a lot of side streams. There's also a lot of residuals that come out. And you would never see in a refinery them taking all of those residuals and all those side streams, blending them into one common sewer, and then getting to the end of the refinery and trying to decide how to pull value out of that. But that's really what we do in the water industry. We take water discharges, water effluents, from all the various points in a refinery, a chemical plant. We throw them all into a common sewer, and then we try to make sense out of it at the point of discharge. Really, the trend and the move that I'm excited about, and we've had some quite a bit of interest especially in the Middle East here, is looking at the overall water plan for a plant through audits, through a lot of sampling, through a lot of conceptual engineering. Really looking at how the water effluents, which I would call effluents rather than wastewater, where those effluents are produced in the plant, what their quality is, what their availability is, their reliability, and taking each of those effluents individually and developing a plan for either treating it or combining it with other processed effluents, and coming together with an overall plan where we can match sources of water with points of demand in the plant. And really only when you get down to a very, very small amount of water that just is not economically treatable or recoverable, then that becomes your wastewater stream. But that is a very, very small piece of what most plants consider their wastewater now. Yeah. So that's what we've been working on. We see some of the leaders in the industry really embracing that concept, and I expect to see that as a major trend in most industrial plants in the future.
Yeah, thank you very much, Davis. That brings me to my next question to Philippe. When we talked about for Degremont, the water use is a strategic move. You described it as continuation of the business for the future. Can you share a bit about the vision Degremont has?
Yes, for Degremont, we are moving more and more into reuse projects on a worldwide basis. Why is that? First of all, we saw all our clients in the industry having more and more pressure to get water access. So as water access is now very scarce, people is asking for us to try to reuse a lot their water. Whatever is the industries, I would say food, steel mills, for example, for rolling mills. We have recently received some requests, which was not the case before. Refineries as well in downstream. Mm-hmm. We saw also oil fields having that kind of request. At the moment, produced water reuse is, I would say, less frequent due to the price of oil, where all the operators are very slow in their decision process making. But we move in the reuse, really because there is a need. There is a need also in regards to the water impact. There is a need of, they don't access to the water resource, so they are more and more eager to pay the price to reuse the water, which is of course much more than desalination water, mm-hmm. or much more than any kind of water. But the key point is that more than the regulation, they don't access to the resource, to the water. So therefore, they ask us how to save water as a maximum. We saw that in China with recent orders. We have recently secured some orders in the Gulf also for the same kind of topics. And now technology is ready. What we are also working a lot is try to change the technology, try to move, do research, do development to reduce all this kind of cost.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then, sorry, before moving back to you, Hervé, another question for you, Philippe. We were discussing about the technical versus costs. And we've been having, I would say, challenging discussion, but help us understand more how do you position the cost / innovation.
Our approach is not technology for technology. We are there for business, of course. But if I give you an example, for example, on produced water, the treatment of produced water for reuse, for example, is in a range of $4 to $7 a cubic. So it's really a lot of money, $4 to $7 a cubic, if you compare with what the industry is used to see, let's say from desalination water and so forth. And this need is also very strong, for example, in gas, frac water, and so on. And at this value of the water, if you have a water cut, for example, of 5 barrels of water per barrel of oil, the price is $25 for a barrel of oil. You know, so this is really simply killing the project at present oil prices. So our intention, and that's what we do, developing a new kind of osmosis, new kind of membranes, is try to reduce that and bring that at least by a factor of 2 to reach that target. So we are doing a lot of development in that regard, working also on special resins, working on any kind of combination. Mm-hmm. That's where we see a big need for technology improvement. Downstream, it's less the case because at the moment, of course, downstream industry is getting better, and in other fields, the water volume is less. But really in the upstream, if we want to move forward with a water project, give a life to water injection project or steam injection project, cost has to be decreased a lot. So that's why we are working on that in the Gremont at the moment with a very big effort, and we hope to get some success very soon.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Philippe. Hervé, back, just trying to build on what Philippe was saying on the references on the production water for oil and gas and mining. How is this really projecting in the future for the industry water in the GCC specifically?
Yes, the produced water field is definitely one of the key point of interest, because yes, it's a growing interest, and the regulation is getting tougher in that respect. At the same time, this is where the challenges are the biggest, because temperature can go very high, salinity can be much more than the sea. So in terms of corrosion, in terms of material selection, it's very, very challenging. So yes, we see the produced water field as definitely one of the biggest opportunity. If I can elaborate a little bit about the approach and about the sustainability, there's two kind of indicators that we use to try to give decision tool to the industries, whether how much they should invest. And the first one is a water impact index, where you do a kind of balance of your water in and out of your plant, take into account the scarcity of the water and the quality of the water in and out. And the second is the true cost of water and the risk that you have associated to your production related to the water. So what is interesting is that when you talk about cost of water, you would take the unit cost. Sometimes those unit costs are subsidized, so it gives a fake value of the actual cost of water. So first of all, you should put the subsidies aside and consider what is a real cost of it. And then there's not only the cost of production, but it could be the cost associated to some risk that you may be having.
I think that was thanks for initiating that, because one of the points I wanted really to trigger to share with the team is that you were discussing about the risks that needs to be considered for the long-term investment plans.
Yes.
So starting with the subsidies, we're talking about 5, 10, 20 years from now. So how do you see those risks included in the project management standards for us from right now?
Yes. So if you only consider the present situation, your investment plan would not go for water reuse, because you might find that it's easier to take the water in the aquifer and discharge it back to the sea. But if you think ahead and you see what are my risks about my water production, if the regulation goes more strict, which is definitely a trend in GCC, and if there is more scarcity about the water resource. So in that case, you have to allocate the current pricing as per your knowledge of the market. But then you have to take into account different risk. If your activity presents a risk on the biodiversity, you can be sure there'll be some regulation to protect it, and therefore, in the future, your activity is balanced from the industry point of view, but then it won't be anymore because you'll have to pay taxes or you have to correct whatever has been damaged before.
Okay.
So what we try to do is, through the true cost of water, is to allocate the treatment cost as well as risk. And risk is a concept which is very common for industries, and risk assessment and opportunity assessment is the day-to-day approach. So we don't only make mathematics from the current prices, but we try to make projection about the image impact, about the regulatory modification, about the social impact, in order to agglomerate everything. And then you see that, yes, it does make sense to invest in water because it secures so many risks for the future, and then the investment is worth it. But if it's just down to the production cost or treatment cost, then you would not do those investments. So you have to project yourself, quantify and value the risk. And there are examples about what disaster bad water management has led to, and then you could price it.
Yeah.
And this is a very good decision tool for industries.
Okay, very good. I think that's a very important topic. I wanted to move back to David. We were discussing. I mean, you mentioned about the sustainable water management approach as a holistic approach to look at that, and you're also talking about I wouldn't say the risk, but one of the issues that you foresee, which is on the operating expertise. I mean, back to what Hervé was describing, those are the risks that we need to put up front in any projects. How do you see the operating expertise put in risk either today or if we don't do something about it in the future on the projects for industrial water?
Okay. We see a lot of projects. I see a lot of companies when we work, on the conceptual engineering and feed engineering with a lot of companies, and so we're working very closely with them as they're justifying capital expenditure for new water systems. And of course, inherent in any capital justification is an expectation of what the results are, what the benefits are that they're going to get out of that investment, and what kind of lifespan they can expect out of that investment. And then we also talk with a lot of companies who are very disappointed after they have installed a system and they find that they're not getting that lifespan, they're not getting the performance. And what we find most often is that it's not a matter of the system. It's really not a deficiency in the system, even though that's the easiest thing for a lot of the companies to blame. More often than not, it's a deficiency in the operating expertise. Companies are simply not making the same investment and the same consideration for the O&M of a system as they are for the acquisition of the system. So they're putting a lot of effort into designing, and you think about all the controls and all the reviews that we do during the design of a system to make sure that it's absolutely rock solid. And then we get into operations, and they tend to have very low qualified labor. They don't have good data management. They don't have technology, people familiar with the chemistry or the biology or the physics of the system to really counsel the operators and maintain the records and optimize the system. And very often it results not only in poor performance, but it results in lower lifespan of the equipment. I think we've all seen systems, MBR systems or RO systems, where the membranes, for example, a major portion of the overall capital cost, does not meet its expected lifespan at all, and that can have completely change the economics of the overall investment. So we're really working with a lot of companies now to try to talk a lot more about what is the appropriate investment on the O&M side, and that leads into the asset management side, to really look at whether they're investing properly on the operation of the system and the management of the assets after the startup, with the same level of diligence as they did during the design and construction of the systems.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the idea of we know how important and how the decision is made when it comes to the strong capex for our industry specifically. I think the idea of or the approach of looking at the operating factors are more with the capex mindset. I think that's extremely important, and we take that as one of the key points. Back to you, Hervé. When we talk about the new business models or the new ways of building a more sustainable business in the future, about your efforts in the consultancy, such as the auditing, the data management. How do you see that bringing more sustainable growth for the industrial water in general?
Yeah. We've signed quite a few agreements, global agreements with different groups like Vallourec, like Danone, and the starting point of those agreements is to start making an audit, start making a benchmark. A lot of international industries are hungry or eager to have benchmark and references to challenge their performance. So the first point is that they say, please, can you come over and audit my plant so that I know what opportunities I have and what I could do out of it. And it's true that this is one of the main difference compared to municipal market, where there is a capacity and the tender goes out and that's it. Here, industries are much more complex, and there is first quite often a need, especially in this GC, to have experts present to make sure the data is collected in the proper way, that it's representative, and that you can really work a proper design out of it. So what we see compared to a conventional EPC tender is some audit, some proposal, and quite often also the client is asking, okay, provide me something, but you have to operate it for 10 years because I really want to be confident.
Okay.
So the upstream and the downstream of the proposal process, so the audit initially and then the O&M after the performance test, is something that we see more and more to industries, and we believe it's the right approach for this kind of challenges.
Okay, so I think that's a very important point, because you're really positioning, I mean, I'm very happy because in this panel we are really having people from different parts of the value chain, from technology provided OEMs. I think what you touched base here is there is a very strong awareness on the consultancy and having that level of confidence and expertise upfront in any project, which takes me maybe to the next point with you, Philippe. We discussed, I mean, consultant again, third parties are really helping us optimizing and bringing benchmark. Where is the role of regulations? We were trying to discuss, is it an issue or is it an opportunity, really bringing the same level of confidence on the way we do business?
Yeah, what we saw in regulation at the moment is that regulation, for example, in countries like Qatar, are stricter and stricter. In a way that in Qatar, at the moment, discharge is not anymore authorized. You have to do a lot of reuse. You have to do treatment, and the regulation is coming into force. So all the industry is moving in view with that, and this is bringing, of course, project. We saw the same trend, by the way, in Saudi. It's not in place at the moment, but in Saudi, situation is that the state, I would say, wants to, let's say, remove the subsidies, inclusive the one from the industry. They want also to remove the energy consumption using too much desalination water, reduce the energy consumption. So all the trend, all the discussion that you have with the regulatory bodies are towards enforcement for the industries, wherever they are. Could be Aramco, SABIC, could be Modern, the new industrial city, to have in place a reuse policy and to have in place a non-discharge policy. So as a matter of fact, you have two effects. One effect is the regulation pressure, and the second one is the cost pressure. So industries, like it was on the time in Europe and still now, try to fight against this regulation, of course, in order to, I would say, scream about the price and the cost, especially in upstream, but regulations are coming. We saw that in Saudi, we saw that in Qatar, we saw that in Kuwait as well. So for us, it's a good trend. It's a change, as David was saying, and it is pushing clients towards optimization of their facilities, and with, let's say, reusing the water, having stricter discharge limits. Clients are facing difficulties of operation. Because before, of course, if the plant was not properly working, it was not too much an issue. So with the difficulty of operation, they go to asset optimization, to asset operation, and then we enter in discussions of services beside simply giving the plant. And entering in services and so on, it is also forcing you to enter in the definition of what are the exact needs, what are the purpose of the plant, and do a plant which fits for the purpose. So that's where, for us, the regulation is of a good help at the moment, even in a time of, especially in this region, of, let's say, price crisis.
Thank you very much, Philippe. So we have 5 minutes, maybe time to take a couple of questions from the audience before we wrap up. Okay, please.
There is a trend that there is more lobbying needed to push for pricing the extraction of water for energy soil users. So that will actually bring in the business case to go for the recovery users. Have you seen the regions?
I didn't hear you, sorry.
Are we seeing this pressure on actually pricing for extraction of water?
I don't know how close we are from any kind of regulation, but it's the same trend as pricing carbon. So basically you have to give a cost to nature, and I think that the progress on the COP21 shows that we are not here yet, but this is something in progress. And yes, when you take something from nature, whether it's carbon or whether it's water, you will have to pay a cost for it. And this is more or less what we integrate in the true cost of water. Water is not free. If you extract it from the ground, it has a cost on the environment. So it's something quite complicated, and if there are subsidies on water and energy, it means we are quite far from removing subsidies, and the next step will be to put taxes on it. So there is a way, but the trend is towards that, which makes perfect sense. Yes.
We're seeing some companies go that way, Aramco in particular. When we're doing economic evaluation of various alternatives for Aramco, the basis of water, even if the plan is to draw groundwater, which is very low cost, obviously, the basis for the evaluations and the selection of the approach is based on the replacement cost of that water. So, in a lot of cases, we're doing some projects in Iraq right now. A lot of social pressure on the water. They've got very limited fresh water, a lot of social pressure on the water. So if we're looking at taking that water out of the river and using it, we've really got to evaluate that water not as being free sitting there, but what would it cost to go replace that for the population. So I think as the larger, more sophisticated companies go in that direction, at least in the industrial market, we'll see the selection of alternatives that are more water conscious than what we've seen in the past.
So maybe a question from the that is coming online right now. So one of the questions: what are the tools that you are using to quantify water risk?
So
maybe to you, Hervé.
Yes. So this is what we call the true cost of water. So basically, we would be first using unit prices which are not subsidized and which also include some taxes. So this would have a kind of risk assessment. So it's a occurrence probability versus the impact, and then there's also, so this is relatively simple to use if you remove subsidies and if you put a cost for the water extraction. What is a bit more difficult to price is the risk that you have, social risk. And then what we try to do is to use similar industries which have suffered from some pollution which affected a lot their image or their production capacity. So what we try to do is put a fake price on carbon, on water, remove subsidies, and for other things we try to use cases where we've seen that similar industry have suffered because they didn't provision for those risks.
Okay, Very good. Thank you. Any other questions? Maybe last one, please.
Question for David. You mentioned the separation of the different wastewater streams, trying to treat those processes separately. Are you seeing any movement with industrial parks where different participants are designing an aggregate system? We're seeing some of that in China and a little bit in North America. I'm wondering if that trend is happening here, and if so, what are the drivers from either regulatory or an economic standpoint?
I think it's a great point, and a lot of industrial parks, that were sort of developed in the old style, the infrastructure got developed before they really brought in people to think about it. So they tended to have a single industrial sewer. So often there was a separation between the industrial sewage and the domestic sewage, but that was about it. I think in the modern industrial parks that we're seeing now, there's much more separation in the sewage system. So even if you're going to have a centralized sewage treatment or industrial sewage treatment plant or industrial wastewater treatment plant, there's still segregation in the sewer networks to at least have some high TDS lines, some oily waste lines, and then maybe some general or heavy metal bearing waste. So if we can keep those separate, up to the point of the treatment plant, then there's a much greater opportunity for recovery of the water and a much lower cost of the treatment.
Do you see the economics favoring the retrofit to that kind of a scheme, or is that only really greenfield?
I think there's probably a case. It really comes down to if you have an industrial park that's got several large producers, several large chemical plants or refineries, then I think it can be done. If you've got an industrial park that's populated with, dozens or hundreds of small mixed-use kind of industrial facilities, then it's going to be a lot tougher. Mm-hmm. So I think here in the Middle East, I think I come from California. In California, we've got a very rigid pre-treatment requirement where the waste has to be pre-treated before it's put in the sewers. In the Middle East, that hasn't been the strategy for a long time, but I think it's certainly going that way now. And so in those parks where there's a much wider variety of small industrial generators, that pre-treatment standard will help to dampen some of that.
And if I can see also, sometimes those amount of waste is not significant, but it could affect drastically when mixed. And then the good thing is that you could have tankers that would bring it, and you don't need the whole infrastructure. If you need to double or triple your network in the industrial area, it's gone. If you're lucky to have segregated some areas, you could put one pumping station for one, but if it's spread, then it's more or less the hazardous waste management which could come in, and then you could have dedicated trucks for dedicated things, and then you have your receiving station. So it means that you would bypass your network. If it's a small quantity, if obviously it's a large one, then you do need a specific infrastructure, but infrastructure to double or triple your sewer lines is practically not feasible if it's already existing. In that case, the tankering may not be a very good practice in absolute, but this has at least this advantage of not needing a heavy infrastructure if the volume are small.
Okay, very good. I think we're already time's up. Maybe just a minute to wrap up. So first of all, thank you very much, David, Hervé, and Philippe for the discussions and for the questions. I think we all agree that the industrial water treatment is becoming only more strategic with the transformations that the GCC countries are going through by moving from oil-based companies to more diversified. I think across the value chain, it's our efforts, all of us, are taking notes for a few ideas, a few perspectives. The importance of having a holistic approach on the water management in general, I think is extremely important. That came from CH2M. I think innovation on the technologies. I mean, Philippe, you shared with us the efforts that you are doing on the cost versus technology. Extremely important as well to factor some of the risks that we see today in the long-term investment plans that we are doing. And I think with I like the code, the wastewater is a continuation of the business, so that's going to be really one of the sustainability factors for the GCC. And of course, I think regulations are part of the cost competitiveness, which is the environment we're operating in. So with that, I would like to thank you again for the opportunity to work on this exciting session, and thanks for the audience for being with us for the last session of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.